All right, we're going to finish up talking about the 4 P's, and we are going to end with our discussion of integrated marketing communications. I don't want to just turn the projector off and then roll it up again, but integrated marketing communications is what we use now as sort of the replacement for advertising. Because in essence, advertising is part of integrated marketing communications, but it is so much more than that. And we'll get into the definitions that you'll study for the test later, but I kind of want you to understand this. Integrated marketing communications is exactly what it sounds like. It is the delivering of a focused message across multiple mediums. It's the concentrated use of force, if I'm going to be using a war term, okay? It means that all of your messages agree with each other, and based upon the medium itself, you craft the message based upon the medium itself. And we'll talk about these one at a time, but I want you to get first a bigger idea, the 50,000-foot view from up when we talk about the 3 models. This is not in your book, but this will be a test thing. There are 3 ways in which the messages are crafted. First way is the one-to-many. In the one-to-many model, it means that a single message is passed to multiple individuals across the strata. It is a single branded message delivered to multiple individuals. This is the classic mass communication. If I were to talk about traditional media, this is where the traditional media would lie. So we would be looking at television, which is the classic of all. A single message crafted, broadcasted to as many possible users as you can. Radio. Radio is still viable. It is still a single message crafted to multiple individuals. Billboard advertising, it's the same thing. It's a single message crafted to different individuals. Now, if I were to say television, radio, and billboard, of course, the differences between both of, or all of those 3 is that they have different delivery environments. Television is a visual medium, so it is great for demonstration purposes, especially when the good is brand new. Radio is theater of the mind. It is better for some explanations, or especially when it is reminder advertising. And billboards, of course, are crafted around the 5-second message that needs to be repeated again and again and again. But the message stays the same. And so this is the traditional format for what we consider advertising to be. The next one is called the one-to-one. And this is when two individuals talk to each other. Under the one-to-one, we have personal selling. We also have public relations sometimes. But this is the individual crafting an individual message for an individual customer. We'll talk about a little bit more of this when we go into personal selling. This is by far the most expensive of all advertising mediums per individual, but it has enormous advantages. You can override objections at the point of the objection itself when you're performing this. The last is the most recent, and this is the very special one, and it's the many-to-many. And this is the brave new world of social media, in which the message is sent out across the strata to all of the given members, and the members are the ones who, in essence, craft the message. Social media is the brave new world. Social media has enormous difficulties, of course, because everyone adds or changes the story based upon their own personal experiences. And yet, here's one of the issues. If we look at and we think about controlling the message across a spectrum, then certainly mass media is here. If we're looking at somewhere in the middle, we're looking at the one-to-one model in here. And then the many-to-many model, in which basically you have no control whatsoever. And yet, if I also on this same axis were to put trust, I would have here little trust and most trust. And so here is the dichotomy in which every marketing individual has to work with in the modern world. Yes.
Would many-to-many be like brand ambassadors?
Now, brand ambassadors have a little bit of difference in there. They come somewhere in this. You're also talking about influencer marketing, right? It all depends on who owns the influencer. Okay. So if any of you know Scotty Kilmer, I look at him on YouTube. He's got like 5.5 million. He does automobile stuff every day. Scotty has no contracts with anybody. Okay. So Scotty, when he says something is worthwhile, you believe it because nobody's paying for it. And there's the difference. Who's paying? And it's a big question. Brand ambassadors, now they get you there halfway. Certainly, if we're talking about individuals, if you're talking also about paid spokespeople, celebrities is the thought I was getting to. Yes, they get you halfway there. I mean, I can't say the word NASCAR without saying Richard Petty at the same time, all right? There's been no brand ambassador for NASCAR like Richard Petty in my day, all right? And a lot of that also has to do with their dependence on trust. And trust is a very easily malleable thing. If you trust them as brand ambassadors, then absolutely they carry the weight, all right? It's kind of interesting. Then you also have another thing that's called marketing mavens. And those tend to be individuals who are promoters, are self-paid promoters of a particular product. And this especially has to do with brand communities. So individuals who tend to be Apple oriented, Harley Davidson oriented, all of those kind of fall somewhere in this mid spectrum in here. And of course, the value that they have, especially in ritual, comes up especially in the fact of that they are ownership by a group. And so that's pretty much where they are. So here's the issues. So how effective is my communication? And that's one of the difficulty things, especially in social media. How do we measure whether you're successful or not? By the number of clicks? Well, if we look at maybe 3% or less in clicks or click through where you actually, engage, maybe perhaps not. And it's one of the other parts of the Brave New World now is how do we define success? So these are the three models that any integrated marketing communication flow under. The one-to-many mass communication by whatever medium you wish, the one-to-one model in which one individual talks to another, and then the last is the many-many model, which is the Brave New World of social media. And so now we will go on. And influencer marketing is amazing. I've got a journal. I'm one of you writing on that lately. But yeah, I would say it's the Brave New World, especially for the fact of the power of the mass media. It's quite amazing. So let's roll on to the definition you're going to look for the test. What is integrated marketing communication? IMC refers to the strategic and coordinated use of promotion to create one consistent message across multiple channels to be able to maximize their persuasive impact. Mass media, of course, is the most ubiquitous. But it's important to understand the reasoning behind IMC. The most effective reason for IMC is that it saves money. It reduces the cost by focusing on an integrated message. You can't launch a campaign with no clear promotional message. And a good IMC program gives a focus for all members to coordinate around. It considers every single contact point with the customer. It drafts a concrete message that is consistent to all of the members. And it allows the consumer to decide whether they belong or not. And so it's kind of interesting because in my other classes, like when I teach marketing in undergraduate, advertising is always the last thing I teach. which is interesting because you think if you're marketing, is that advertising is the first thing? No, advertising is the end result of all strategic planning, understanding the consumers, creating the position, and then ultimately putting together the 4 Ps to work in a coordinated manner. IMC is the very last. So what is the strategic way that we can get consumers to look at us? Now, the book uses this one, and I think it's a great one. There are multiple ones, and so we're going to use this because this is the one that the book says, and you'll be tested on, is what's called the AIDA model, AIDA. So what's the attention model? Well, the attention model basically says that there's no way to sell to people if they don't know that your product exists. The first job of any promotional message is to attract attention. And so one of the really cool campaigns that happened maybe a decade ago was this guerrilla marketing by Mini Cooper. All right. So Mini Cooper, by the way, in case you know, was built by BMW. It's actually, the model is originally British. They wanted to have a small car, but they wanted to be able to separate it from the small cars that are out there. And so they went with the idea of the small car. So here you are, you see them somewhere, and there they are, a little controller box, like this is a little control car, and that's exactly what it was. They put outside, like, they put this like a big Christmas box. So like, that's like the box you got for Christmas. So that's how you got it. It was a brilliant, effective campaign for doing the one thing that the A part means, grabbing attention. And it worked. It was brilliant. Mini Cooper did quite well. I have no idea what their sales are now, but in terms of a launch, from launch to maturity, good job. Good job, marketing people. You knew what you were doing. Okay. The next is interest. Attracting attention doesn't necessarily sell products. You have to demonstrate its features, outline its advantages once you get their attention. And if we're talking the modern social media, one of the ways that you do that, or the most effective way, remember when I talk about the message, control of the message, is to create testimonials where individuals who are particularly using that particular product talk about its benefits and outline its advantages. So back in the 70s, when Sears was launching the Die Hard battery, one of the things that they did was they created testimonials of individuals who left their lights on for 8 hours and came back and their car started. That was examples of what a testimonial is. And so that is how you go about and create interest. The next is you've got to create desire. Firms have to move customers to the wanting of that particular product, and that's what good advertising does. And so how do you do that? One of the ways you do that is the mythos, or the native advertising of that particular product. You talk about its history. You talk about how it has been built. Blue Ridge Energy, who I did a marketing class with like 4 years ago, when we were talking to Blue Ridge Energy about what particularly they sell, I got into a discussion about them, how they electrified this whole area, how they went about bringing power to this particular community. And I said, you've got the best story of all. You don't have to do anything but simply tell that story. And that's what one of the ways that desire is created. The other way is to associate it with some other particular slice of life that you would desire to find yourself in. And those are especially in goods that are visceral, that basically are affective, that are emotive in nature. There's the desire to join in and become part of the group. And then the last is action. Convincing the customer to at least try the product. And this is where possession utility comes in. At least try the product. And this is where trial sizes, freemiums, those kind of things are where ultimately they spell their advantages. So I did a recording for the Analytics Summit, and one of the cards that I had, memory cards, was corrupted. Now, I've been through this before. I'm an IT guy. So I went online to look for what I would consider to be the best unerase or undelete out there. I loaded it. It said, yep, we can get it all back. Spend $40. And I said, done. Because it would do what I wanted it to do. It's as simple as that. So he had my attention. I definitely had interest. Boy, did I have desire, because I wanted to recover that. And I was called to action just by spending the money. The software was going to deliver me what I wanted as long as I delivered it back. And believe me, for what I recovered, that was a bargain. Okay. So the AIDA model is one of those models that you can use for just about any possible promotion. Now, if you remember from my discussion on supply chain yesterday, we talked about two particular ones that are directly invested in /supply chain. I said that dirty word. But anyway, it's all part of channels masquerading under their supply chain. And those are the pull strategy and the push strategy. In the pull strategy, you market to the final customer and you get them to desire products. And so, as I talked about before, the manufacturer, wholesaler, retailer, and the consumer. In the pull strategy, you go directly to the consumer to create demand. The demand pulls the goods through the system in one continuous chain. This comes under public relations, advertising, sales promotions. These can be mass media or many-to-many or one-to-one. Excuse me, we're going to leave out personal selling, okay? The push strategy says that the manufacturer goes to the supply chain, the wholesaler. Usually this may be a manufacturer's agent, all right? Those particular individuals in the wholesale, they go to the retailer. Once again, these are agents. The retailers have personal salespeople on the floor or wherever they are, and they sell directly to the consumer. In essence, you have one after the other after the other. They're both used. It doesn't matter. Well, in one way it does. But what I mean is that once again, IMC means it's the concentrated use of force, the consistent messaging. Now, one of the unique things about selling to wholesalers is that wholesalers tend to be specialists, just to let you know. Wholesalers may be the biggest service industry that there actually is. Wholesalers will take standardized manufacturing units. They'll take them and put them into play in particular industries where the qualities of those particular products are excessively good, then sell to retailers below them. The classic example is stainless steel tubing. Now you can think where stainless steel tubing would be needed, especially when it comes to corrosive agents. But even think what stainless steel tubing means to the offshore oil industry, where salt is the #1 killer of everything out there. And so you have specialists who deal in oil field products that have nothing to do with anything else other than those particular industries. And these agents tend to be specialized in the values that they bring. Whereas the pull strategy, it tends to be much more wide open. So let's finally talk about that particular thing called advertising. Advertising is the most common, the most visible element that has come out. And under this, I would also say this is where influencer marketing comes. Influencer marketing is when you associate products with people you trust, and this has been gaining a place greater and greater because influencers do have substantial bases before they ever start selling. Anybody know how much you make in YouTube, by the way? If you have 1 million subscribers, just off the advertising, the average is you make about $65,000 a year, okay? Scotty Kilmer has 5.65 million subscribers. So calculated out roughly, Scotty ain't hurt, okay? He's been a guy who was a mechanic for something like 30, 35 years. He does 2 videos a day. His son's basically put together the videos now for him, and he's hilarious. I love the guy. But he's the guy that they trust, especially as an influencer, because nobody owns him. So once you're known as a shill, that's the difficulty when influencing marketing, your trust levels. So what are the different challenges in advertising? The first is that just getting started, the cost can be very high. Putting together an ad campaign, coming up with a defined message is only the start. The average 30-second TV spot is around $120,000. That's a 30-second commercial. Now, the difficulty also with that is that we have a rapidly segmented, diverse, and distracted consumer base. And so the advantages of mass marketing, especially in television, shrink. Whereas if I'm on YouTube, even though, even though Scotty Kilmer isn't promoting my products, if I can run a 15-second advert before his talk, then I've hit at least 60,000 people in 5 minutes. And so that's how big it can be. You also don't know how much to invest. The difficulty of understanding how effective an ad is very difficult to measure. What's your return on investment for an advertisement? Are you simply holding where you are? Or are you growing your base? And then finally, let us put to rest the hopeless consumer. We have to make sure that our message is honest and it's accurate. When green marketing started in the 90s, rapidly after that, within the first 5 years, you had the concept of what is known as greenwashing. Whitewashing, by the way, just in case you don't know what that means, whitewashing is when you would put a thin white veneer over usually over either an existing paint or when you're putting something as a sealant across wood. Whitewash tend to be short. It just merely covered it to make it look better. But that's in essence what whitewashing was. So a hotel in New York was advertising the fact that they were deciding that they would allow you to decide whether or not to use your towels over again. And that was their consistency with green marketing. And the truth came out was that basically their cleaning fees were out the ceiling. They figured that was a cheap way. Their minutes leaked, okay? In other words, they found the real reasons out for it, and they weren't liked very much, all right? It has to be a credible source within your sphere that has an honest message. And that's where advertising comes from. So, public relations. Public relations tracks public attitudes to help identify issues that may elicit public concern and bring a voice to both their customers and their stakeholders. They hope to elicit positive relationships through interaction. What they hope to do also is enlighten consumers, especially when it comes to the effectiveness in their dealing with issues in and around the products that they sell. Now, there are several ways that public relations are done. One-to-one is part of the matrix. One of the other ways is what's known as a press release. One of the reasons why I make my students write 600 words or less on position papers is because if someday you may have to create very succinct articles, expressing your feelings. So a press release is usually 300 words, no more, all right? Usually it's a discussion on some particular product or support of a given message, but it's crafted to bring some kind of illumination to a particular position that the company supports. An article of content is usually a magazine or a journal article that is submitted by the corporation, once again, to support something within the corporation itself. A white paper is something completely different. A white paper can be long. It can be anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 words. It can be published in Harvard Business Review or other locations, and they basically are promoting what they consider to be a possibility in the future that people should be aware of. And so one of the white papers that I saw by Boston Consulting Group was on the process of nearshoring, and that was the possibility of manufacturing being returned to the United States. And it was partially correct. They did find circumstances where corporations, instead of moving offshore, decided to come home. And so that's one of the advantages. So public relations, if you're PR, marketing is extremely important, you're valuable, and you tend to be in the same area where hopefully you find salespeople to be as well. One of the great of all time public relations was during the 80s in what was called the Tylenol scare. Have any of you heard about that? So what was the Tylenol scare?
That someone had poisoned one of the buildings in a regular bottle of Tylenol.
Right, exactly. So in Chicago, I think it was 3 people died because they were taking cyanide-laced Tylenol that was found on the shelves in Chicago. So this was a big thing, all right? How you treat these things does a lot towards whether you're going to survive or not. And so the Corporation for Tylenol did something extraordinary. They broomed the shelves of every place in the United States from every Tylenol bottle on everywhere in every retail location. They did this actually in the space of 3.5 days. Just think of that. Just think of the massive amount of work that was. And in 1 week, Tylenol, the president of Tylenol, and I remember this, came on television and said, and they came up with the triple seal kind of bottle, all right? So the president of Tylenol came on television, I remember this, and he said, we cannot possibly replace the deaths of the individuals who passed away in this tragedy. All we can do is the very best to be able to make sure this never happens again. It explained the Tylenol triple seal cap, the locking, all the other things, and then they did one thing better. He said, we speak to all the manufacturers of pharmaceuticals in the United States, and we asked all of our fellow partners to do the same thing. Yeah. So what did he just do? He made the $80 million they spent on research for all of that. They said, you all have to spend the same amount. Okay. So it was a brilliant ploy. It basically, and I shouldn't say ploy because you make it sound like it was just kind of, it was a good effort. It really was. It made prescription over-the-counter medicine safer. And what they did was basically up the ante and say that all pharmaceutical manufacturers have to do the same. That's when it was good, okay? Bad. Anybody ever hear of Perrier water? Okay, yeah, Perrier water. So Perrier water comes from France. It is carbonated water that is drawn out of the rocks in an area of France. Now, what also is in the caves deep down there is also radiation, just in case you don't know. Radiation occurs naturally in rock, all right? And so there was a scare that happened that with Perrier saying that there was potential radiation in the Perrier water itself. And Perrier ignored it until finally, after 8 weeks, there was so much clamoring, the number of Perrier bottles drank dropped 80%, that Perrier finally investigated, found that there was nothing to do with that. But unfortunately, Perrier went out as a business. It's been rebought by Schweppes. And in essence, the company died because they did not do something effective. And so this is an example of good public relations, and it's an example of bad ones. You can't let these things go without addressing it, all right? It comes under the old heading of F around and find out. Okay, sorry. Personal selling, okay. Personal selling is the most expensive and the most precise form of communication available. Personal selling, if you'll notice, is in the middle there because it has enormous advantages, but it has its own challenges as well. Personal selling is when one individual attempts to inform customers about products in a one-to-one or a one-to-several kind of relationship. It is very customized to the relationships between them. Good salespeople try to find some commonality between themselves and the individuals that they're buying. Personal selling can overcome objections at the point of the objection itself. They can allow messages to be interpreted into a substance in which the other individuals understand. But the difficulty, of course, is that the cost to recruit and train these salespeople is enormously high. The average salesperson, and average is such a difficult thing, but it takes generally 3 years and around $150,000 to train a good salesperson. All right. The lifespan for salespeople is usually less than 3 and greater than 5. So if you haven't been able to catch by the 5th year, that's where the Mendoza line is. And yet after 5 years, that's when salespeople really hit their stride. Interestingly enough, for salespeople, they prefer you right out of undergraduate school rather than graduate school, because they would rather give you the graduate education in the industry that you like. It's very difficult to take technical people and train them sales. It's much easier to take salespeople and teach them technical stuff. And so sales is one of those things that you have to have under your fingertips to be able to do well and to be successful in. Well, there's also challenges with that, especially when it comes to the fact that technology has impacted that. We've entered the age of the specialist as well. Not overnight, but it's been over the last 20 years. Corporations such as Salesforce has taken away, or let's just say it has revamped one of the most difficult things in sales, if any of you have ever done it, and that's generating leads. And so a lead is an individual who possibly may buy from you, who might be at the attention and interest stage. Salesforce generates algorithms so that the leads are generated for you, which means that there's a specialist called the missionary salesperson. I'm not talking about a position. The missionary salesperson's job is to grab customers for the first time, whereupon they're turned over to sales representatives who take care of that individual through the life of their customer base. Of course, Zoom has made it much easier, prospecting and customer contact. I just had a nephew that got a job with a company in UK. I'm so happy for him. He's going to be making 50% more, but there's only 2 people in the United States, and it's him and his boss in Boston, and he can live wherever he wants. That's where the brave new world in Salesforce and personal selling is. It's no longer limited geographical. So these are some of the changes that personal selling goes through. Now, let me also say this, that because the salesperson can generate their own personalized message, they in essence are the boundary spanners. In other words, they sit in the middle between the corporation and the customer. They tend to have a role somewhere in the middle. They have to sympathize with the customer, but of course work for the company. It means those individuals are the first person you see. And as John T. Malloy, who wrote Dress for Success, says, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. All right? The first moment those corporations meet you is generally that individual when they come in and meet you for the first time. They are the major revenue generators of corporations, no matter how much you do online. And as a matter of fact, as I'm stating now, there's been a rebirth in sales. Because the further and further we get away from people, the more people desire human contact. And so it becomes more valuable than ever. They help build relationships that repeat the business. And that's extremely important because we live in a world no longer where simple transactions mean anything. It is the long-term relationships ultimately that lead to sales again and again. They are the ears of the company who are listening to what their consumers are saying. And they should be one of those places to go when new ideas are being requested. Because they've got their ears to the ground, they're also hearing what the competitors are doing. And they're able to understand, based upon what their competitors are doing, whether you need to act or react. And so the salesperson, they have a lot of needs, or they have a lot of goals. They have great importance. They are 16% of what all businesses spend on doing their normal business. So just think about that, even in this day. You can generate a lot of businesses online, no doubt about it, but it's the personal human contact that gets them coming back again and again. Now, with all of that, we still need individuals who are coordinating all of this, and that's what sales management does. Sales management develops the objectives of the sales force. Objectives, remember this, are quantitatively based over a certain period of time so that you can measure success or failure. So they develop the objectives. They determine whether or not you need to grow the sales force or not. They recruit and they train salespeople. Enabling salespeople means you give them the authorities to be able to make agreements based upon certain parameters. Now, it has to be extremely important. The salesperson, in essence, being on their own in an island, can, in essence, give away carte blanche. And you have to be very careful about what they can do or can't say. And then the last thing, of course, you need to know is whether to evaluate, how do you effectively evaluate a sales force? Sales management requires a specialized individual to handle specialized individuals. Usually you find sales managers rising from the ranks because they are the individuals that are respected. So the last thing to talk about before we go on break is how are salespeople paid? Or are you paid at all? I guess is the other thing. So usually when you're starting, you're giving them a straight salary. The straight salary is basically so that you're assured an income while you're in the training period. Usually it's also if there's an enormous amount of pre and post sale work that you have to do. So in other words, you have to be involved with the consumer that is not earning you any money. It's a nice place to be, but there's no incentive to go out. Straight commission can be multiple ways. So straight commission can be a percentage of sales. It can be a percentage of profit. It means basically at the beginning of the month, you don't know whether you're getting a bill or not, or whether you're getting a check. It makes life very interesting. It gives you every incentive to get up every day and push. but it can be very scary if you're not an experienced salesperson. By the way, the highest paid salespeople in the world are straight commission. If you were a CEO and your salesperson was making more money than you, how would you feel? I'd feel great. I thought, I want to know what this person knows. I mean, that's always one of the conversations is because a lot of salespeople make more than CEOs. And what's wrong with that? Okay. A salesperson who's dedicated enough that they're doing those kind of things, they're doing it on a consistent basis, and they're not doing it wrong. In other words, they're not doing it in a fraudulent manner. Those are the people you want to be able to push again and again. And then the blended is where you have a sales plus a commission. So the most money I ever made before I was sitting in this chair was I was a salesperson. I worked for a company called Con Appliances. There's actually one in Gastonia. I worked in one in Lafayette, Louisiana. And this was 1983. Okay. So I got what was called a draw. So it meant that I got a check in the beginning of let's just say $1,500. And I took that $1,500, but that meant that I had to make that up in sales. I got paid 15% of net profit, which meant that if I sold something and the profit was $100, I would get 15 of those dollars. In 1983 dollars, it was Christmas, so that'll give you an idea. My commission check was $9,000. That's 1983 money. That was a good year. Okay. So I'm just wanting you to say that, you know, commission is a brave new world, but if you're good at it, it's what you want. You don't want to leave money on the table. And it's the confidence and the incentive that you can do that job that ultimately leads you on. Now, can you do it forever? I don't know. I know some pretty successful ones that have. I've known some ones that have burned out. I burned out. I mean, it's not that hard to understand, but these are the ways that we compensate our sales force, and it just depends on what side of the aisle you find yourself. Okay. All right, let's take a 5 to 10 minute break, and we'll come back and we will finish this up. Okay. The last of the IMC is known as a sales promotion. Sales promotions have been around forever. I mean, literally. What does a sales promotion have that makes it different from regular advertising? Sales promotion are incentives to the buyer to purchase a product. The last part says to add value. Basically, what the sales promotions are, the incentives usually have to do with saving money in one form or another. Usually this is a discount at some point. Sales promotions generally are for a specific fixed period of time, whereas advertisements usually don't talk about a time. The goal is to induce trial and purchase. The purpose of the goal is to encourage brand switching, so that if you just try us, you won't go back to your old brand. Now, does the research back that up? Anybody want to take a guess? No, you're right. The people that shook their heads and said no. What we know about sales promotions is that in terms of long-term brand loyalty, people don't change. People stay with the products that they are loyal to. Because the definition, by the way, of brand loyalty, we'll talk about it later, brand loyalty is resistance to changing brands even when the alternatives are more desirable. But sales promotions don't tend to do that. They can target them to consumers. You can target them to channel intermediaries. So like when I worked at Omni Computer Store, one of the incentives that we had, or sales promotions, was a sales contest. And the winning prize was to go to California to be at their annual sales convention. So that was one of the ones to me. I won the contest and the owners went. I hope they were happy. And then the third is to the general sales force so that they can hopefully sell. And so sales promotions have very specific purposes. They are inducing trial within a fixed moment of time through inducements that create value in one way or another. Now, that can be initiated by any member, but usually the manufacturers are the ones, or the retailers that typically offer them. They're a great way to induce or introduce new products, I will say that. If you notice it says established brands, that also means brands that you're loyal to continue brand loyalty. So of all of the activities, the ones that I think generally are the more effective ones are samples. Because I think samples, if they are correctly marketed, are freebies that consumers use to make purchase decisions from. I mentioned, of course, Gain detergent, which fundamentally changed the ground forever in which we consider washing detergent. Now, what's the difference between a discount and a rebate? And this is an important, when we were talking about pricing, you know, you have a price point. And I talked about discounts. Discounts are reductions in the suggested price. Now, what makes a rebate, and why are they tendency to be more desirable? Well, rebates have been around for a while. What a rebate is, it's a return on money based upon a purchase. And so Chrysler in the 70s pioneered the rebates in the purchase of automobiles, in that if you bought an automobile, they would send you a check for $200 to $300. It would be returned. Why would you use a rebate versus a discount? Considering the amount of work you got to do to do the rebates, two good reasons. One, a rebate does not reduce sales. And so if sales figures are vitally important, not having that discount reduces the sale price. So if I say was $7,000, now $6,500, it means my sale is for $6,500. But if I say $7,000 and a rebate check of $500, it means the sales counts for $7,000. It is an accounting kind of jimmy, but it works and it's important. There's a second reason why. Anybody want to guess the number of people who apply for and receive a rebate? What the number is?
20%.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's about 35. So only about 1 out of 3 people actually apply for a rebate. Because if I did it for my tires, my first purchase, when I got my degree, was a set of tires, and the tires cost more than the car I was driving. But I had to use a rebate in order to get that 4th tire. But you would not believe the paperwork, and I'm sure you have if you've done rebates. It's a lot of paperwork. And how do you get your money back? Anybody want to guess?
Now it's like gift cards or.
Right.
Yeah.
Gift cards. Okay. And who wants a stack of gift cards? Okay, seriously. And that is another brilliant thing that they have come up with as well. Because what happens with gift cards is generally there's some residual amount that stays on the gift card that never gets spent. And so those are the 2 reasons why you use rebates, okay? Other examples of sales promotion loyalty programs, who out there has a loyalty program with a supermarket in town? Anybody? Yeah. By the way, even if you don't have one, if you go to Lowe's and show them your App State card, they'll give you the store discount, just to let you know. And on Sunday, by the way, if you show your App State card at Lowe's, they'll give you a 10% discount. Not the home improvement center, the supermarket, okay? Just something for you to know, okay? Publix too, yeah. Yeah, had to do it. Yep. Lowe's, it's all year round, okay? Well, that's one of the reasons why Lowe's is owned in North Carolina. So they tend to be, very protective towards North Carolinians, just to say. Anyway, so what do you have to do to be on the loyalty program? What are the things that you give up? Your name, your phone number, yeah, who you are, how many kids you have, okay? Do you realize the enormity of the power of that information that you give them? Even when they say, we're not going to share it, their point is, yeah, we're going to share it with ourselves. We're going to figure things out. Loyalty programs are win-win situations, both for the people who use them and the corporations themselves. They work great, all right? And so loyalty programs always pay off. And does anybody want to guess what's the #1 discount? In other words, of all of the things that you're in the supermarket, where are the biggest discounts in the loyalty program in the supermarket? It's where you've got the highest margins, by the way. It's where they have the most control of the price. You got it. Exactly. The delis, the meat, all right? Those are the places that have the highest return for supermarkets because they cut their own meat and they make their own food versus all of the other canned stuff, which only has margins of around 2% or so, okay? And so a loyalty program, especially when it comes to meat, are extremely valuable, okay? And so these are consumer sales promotions, and we've all been through them. Now, what is the disadvantage of sales promotions? Well, it's the same problem with reward power. The expectation is that everything is always going to be on sale, no matter what you do. When was the last time you bought a pizza without checking what the discounts are? Doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen with me. It's the first thing I look at when I go online, is to see what they are. And I'm one of those people who buys online, pick up in store, so I'm really weird, okay? But I'm trying to satisfy 3 different groups in my house, and all 3 want theirs from someplace else, and all Dad wants is peace and quiet, so I'll just go anywhere, okay? So the last thing to talk about is also business trade promotions as well. Generally, business promotions are done as a push strategy. And usually what they're done is to encourage effort among channel partners. They do many of the same methods. But their incentives tend to be tied towards corporations versus individuals. And that's important to understand. They give out free merch. They'll give out free education. They will indulge in cooperative advertising. But the differences between sales promotions for individuals and sales promotions for businesses, as I said, is those advantages tend to be with the company. Now, the last thing about sales promotions and why they don't work is I'm going to show you this right now. So, what happens? So, January, February, March, April, June, July. Okay. Sales promotions work like this. Okay. So let's say this is sales. All right. And this is the months. What happens with sales, the sales bumps along, bumps along, bumps along, bumps along, and it gets close to, but not completely, hitting the monthly target. And so what happens generally before is that usually 5 to 7 days before, they'll start a sales promotion. Drop the price by 10%, maybe give a rebate. So ultimately what happens is we make the target. But here's the issue. It doesn't necessarily induce new spending other than move the spending that was going to be done in February into January. So what happens is you start February off at a much lower month than you should have to begin with. And you're climbing. And of course, February is the worst retail month of the year, by the way. You know why February is the worst retail month of the year?
28 days.
Yes, something simple. It's just 28 days. That's the reason why. Okay. So you're climbing. Then 5 to 7 days, you get another sales promotion and you might make it. Then you start even worse. Okay. And you try to climb. And this is the difficulty with sales promotion. Sales promotion creates this sawtooth type demand curve that doesn't get fixed. All right. But why do you do sales promotion? Because it's like peanuts. Once you've done it once, you just can't stop eating. Okay. It's the same kind of thing. Sales promotions are valued, but unfortunately, sales promotions tend to become constant. And there's no way to fix it. It just is what it is. Okay. So we are finished with chapter 6. Just to let you know, I have not, for the parts that have to do with marketing channels, those parts aren't like part of the test questions that I have out there that are quiz questions. Does anybody have any questions they would like to hit right now while we're here?
Marketing channel is not in the quiz, but
Yes. In other words, I don't have questions in the quiz that have anything to do with what I talked about that I drew up about marketing channels. I'll try to put out some things this afternoon. Okay. I'll have to upload this video and then I'll try to find some. It will be 30 questions, multiple guesses. All right. Some of the questions will come from the test banks that you'll be using if you want to use those to study. The test will be for the entire class period, so it's 2 hours. You will have 5 essay questions and choose 4. I might do 6. We'll see. And I always get asked, how much do you want to write? As much as you can make me understand. Okay, it's as simple as that. Some of the things will be just simple list. All right, in some of the 1 or 2 or 3 are the essay questions. Another is it might be reflective. And this would also be questions like that in the multiple guess. And so you need to understand the concept in relationship to the question itself. And so I would talk about using marketing myopia as a drop back. What do you think about this? My suggestion is to consider what is the definition of what I'm asking for, the concept, like marketing myopia, or think of the standards like there is no such thing as constant growth, or whatever the myths are. And if you identify that first, then you're halfway to coming up with the solution. Because you know what? If you come up with a reasonable argument, I've given 10 points on totally different opposing views. I just want to see if you're thinking, okay? That's the number one thing in a good essay question. Let the gears grind, all right? That's what you're here.
The only non-textbook reading we have on the test is
Marketing myopia. You will not have to know marketing is everything. Okay, we did not discuss it, so it won't be on the test. Okay, everything that we talked about here will be on the videos, so you can use those to study for. Okay. All right, we can go. Hope you have a good afternoon. See you Wednesday. Oh, good question. I will bring a test